going on, everyone? Onyx here. Today I'm going to be giving you another episode of Gaming Versus. Yeah. Today I'm not really going to be doing a versus on games. Weird, huh? So, I know probably a lot of people have known about my research video where I talked about the difference between the Nintendo Game Boy and the Sega Game Gear. Which one's truly better? So, I decided to take that up a little bit of a notch, seeing how Nintendo technically won that war. Spoiler alert. Yeah, right. I decided that I'm going to take two items that I own and compare them for you for Gaming Versus. Now, one of these was a donation by a fellow subscriber that I recently have gotten, and one is something that I recently got, well, not recently, I'd say, I've had for a couple years from a friend. This right here is a Game Boy Pocket, okay? This is a legit Game Boy Pocket. As you can see right there, even has the little power button right there and all that jazz. And then we have the Game Boy Color. Legit Game Boy Color. A little bit on its bulky side, you know, has seen better days, you know. And with these two things right here, we're going to really see which one's truly better. Is it the Game Boy Pocket or is it the Game Boy Color? Don't spoil it for us. Let's find out what's going on just by the feel and look with these objects. Well, for one, everyone knows that the Game Boy Pocket came out before the Game Boy Color. You know, it basically came out after the Game Boy. And as you can see on the label number, it actually tells you when it came out. So, it's right there. And in case you couldn't read that, 1989 to 1996. This was how long these technically were out. Then there's the Game Boy Color. You know, it's hard to see when that came out, but you probably can see it. But in case you don't see it, basically it just says 1998. So basically, in a nutshell, this ended in 1996. This came out in 1998. There you go. There was a couple things that the Game Boy Pocket had that the Game Boy Color did not. For one, the batteries that it takes two AAAs. Just two AAA batteries. And it had what I would call a contrast button, where basically it would change the brightness of it. So, let's test this out. You know, for example, there's a little screen right there. And as you can see, I'm playing with the brightness thing right there. Because I don't have a game in it, it's going to have that black block right there. But you can make it dark as hell, medium, or not even be able to be seen at all. So basically, yeah, that was the contrast button that was for the Game Boy Pocket. Plus, the power button is on the top. And of course, the Game Boy Pocket only played Game Boy games. Also, something else I've noticed is the sound for a Game Boy Pocket is a little bit muffled when you put it up to its highest maximum volume. For some reason, it just has a bit of a fuzzy sound to it. So basically, if I was to turn this back on and let you listen, okay. Now, that's it at regular volume. Let me see if I can get this thing at full volume here. Okay, so it's the other way. Okay. Alright. Now, I'm going to have you listen to it with the volume all the way up. Yeah, I don't know if you heard the difference, but it has a more of a fuzzy, muffled feel when you take it to its highest volume. But basically, besides that, it has this little headphone jack right there so you can stick in some regular headphones. You know, that's basically it for the Game Boy Pocket. I'm glad that I own one now. Now, the Game Boy Color has a bit more of a bulk feel to it, mostly in the back here, because of the simple fact that it holds 2 AA batteries. Okay. Also, Game Boy Color is also backwards compatible, to where not only can it play Game Boy Color games, it can also play Game Boy games itself as well. So that's actually pretty freaking cool. Also, it has the little plastic window right there, help out with lighting. Also, the Game Boy Color, when the games came out for the Game Boy Color, you know, they were in color. It's in the freaking name of the freaking console. But when you turn it on, the power button is right there on the side. So, turn that on. That's not even it at its, loudest volume. While that's how high it sounded when you had the Game Boy Pocket on. I guess they decided to increase the volume sound. So, let's turn this thing up all the way to the max here and see how loud it really sounds. So, let's compare the volumes, shall we? So, this is the volume for Pocket. It's regular. Now, let's compare it with the Game Boy Color. I know it sounds the same, but the color is actually louder. But let's see. When it comes to the screen, the speaker, you can actually tell that's the way the speaker looks on the Game Boy Pocket, and that's the way the speaker looks for the Game Boy Color. The speaker is a little bit bigger, and it doesn't have the fuzzy sound wave that you get from the Game Boy Pocket. For some reason, the Game Boy Color is actually, it doesn't have that problem for some reason. I guess they did something with fixing the speaker. Also, another thing about the Game Boy Pocket is the Game Boy Pocket never told you when the batteries were low. For some odd reason, it just never really had that. Now, when it came for the Game Boy had the little red light where you could actually, and if it flickered, that meant that the batteries were low. Well, some of the Game Boys I've seen back in the day when they were popular actually had that. This doesn't tell you when the batteries are low. The Game Boy Color, however, as you can see, has the little red thing there, and basically when that red light decides it wants to fade away a little bit, that means your batteries are actually low. Which one? Well, also still has the little headphone jack thing right there, so that's pretty cool. It doesn't have a contrast button anymore, but then again, when things are played with a Game Boy Color now, you don't really need the contrast anymore. But hopefully one day in my life, I'll actually be able to review one Game Boy that I actually want to review, which is called the Game Boy Light. The Game Boy Light, which was actually made only in Japan and only came out in Japan. It was basically a backlit Game Boy system. It basically was like the fluorescent light thing with a Sega Game Gear, but given to a Game Boy. So that was actually pretty cool. Japan actually got a backlit system before, the Game Boy Advance era. Bullshit. So which one truly is better? Well, automatically, yeah, the Game Boy Color, yeah, because it's backwards compatible, plays Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, and stuff like that. Now, the Game Boy Pocket would probably be your best bet when it comes to just playing Game Boy games. Because if you were to compare this to the regular silver, or if you want to call it gray, regular original Game Boy, if you were to compare the Pocket to the original Game Boy, the Pocket would be better than the original Game Boy. Duh. But in this case, for backwards compatibility, battery power, sound better, Game Boy Color. Yeah, but I guess for portable reasons, if you don't want that extra bulk in the back for the Game Boy Color, you can always do the Game Boy Pocket. Because if you put these side by side, which I'm going to, which one actually is a little bit smaller? The Game Boy Pocket. Which one's truly flatter? The Game Boy Pocket. So for portable reasons, if you just want to just take some couple Game Boy games with you, yeah, go with that. So why not? But anyways, yeah, this was an interesting episode of Gaming Versus. I just decided I wanted to review these two items and show you them and tell you really which one's better. Yeah. In the comments below, let me know, out of all the Game Boys, which one truly gave you the most nostalgic feature? Which one was better to you? I know a lot of people probably say, oh, the Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy SP is better. Yeah, the DS is good too because I own a DS. But, leave a good comment below. Won't hurt you. But, yeah, I'm going to show them one last time, the Game Boy Pocket and the Game Boy Color. Yeah. Great little collector's items for me right there. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Like I said, if you have any requests on 2 games with the same title or 2 consoles that are similar in some ways, give me some requests down below. I'll do some research. Or maybe I'll just use what I already have in my head. This big freaking egghead that I have. But thank you so much for watching. And as always, this is Onyx Spade, and I'm signing out.